Do Christians need to be 100% certain that their beliefs are true? And I guess this goes for all religions, but this time we're going to look at Andy Bannister and his hetero life mate Jonny Somerville as they explore what it is to have doubts. It's time to change it up. This time around, Andy Bannister is going to interview Jonny Somerville and let him give the same kind of carefully designed answers in a much more rambling fashion. Now, I guess it's nice to be able to respond to someone else, but it's still the same old tired religious nonsense that doesn't stand up to a moment's scrutiny. So, yeah, it's really not much of a change, is it? Why can't these people ever come up with anything new?
So, Jonny, I know that one objection people sometimes raise to Christianity is, you Christians are just so confident. You think you know absolutely everything, and that sort of almost certainty just puts some people off.
As it should. Now, it would be one thing if you had any reason at all for your confidence, if you had any evidence or a good rational framework for having the kind of dogmatic conviction that you clearly have. But you don't. And this is something that I've had to point out a lot recently to theists who insist that they're right and everyone who disagrees is wrong just because. Yet, when I ask them how they know that they're right, they've got nothing rational to say. They just know that they're right. They have blind faith that they're right. It makes them feel good, so they must be right. Because that's all that they have. And that fits right into the classical definition for delusion. The assertion that they have a truth that violates what is typically understood as reality. They are substituting feelings for a critical evaluation of the facts. Because they don't care about the facts. The facts just don't matter to them.
Is it true that you have to be 100% certain to be a Christian with no room for doubt at all?
Of course not. In fact, 100% certainty should never exist for anything. The only people who are 100% certain are fanatics. And unfortunately, that describes far too many Christians these days, especially as you get more towards the fundamentalist and evangelical side of the scale. That is not something that anyone ought to be proud of. And I really don't get why these people are.
Well, I think maybe sadly for some Christians they feel that way. There was two strong figures in my life growing up. One was inside the family, one was outside. Loved and respected them equally though. One was my mum. And my mum was great, very conversational. She used to, we would be driving a lot, and usually when she was taking me places, we'd end up in deep conversations. But with this other person, I really respected this person, but I felt I could never question them. As in, it's their way or the highway.
So, a priest or some other member of the clergy. Just taking a wild guess here, but it does seem to fit. Because that's really why the clergy get away with a whole lot of kitty-diddling these days. Because believers are taught not to question their church pastor or other religious official. I mean, they have a direct pipeline to God after all. If you start doubting them, then they might tell God to smite you or some other stupid crap like that. And yes, I have had theists tell me that in the past on more than one occasion. It's how these people get such power and are able to abuse their parishioners so often. Nobody questions them. They are automatically the authority on everything. They tell you how to live your life, and hey, why not leave your innocent children with them? I mean, what could go wrong, right?
And what I found is I often projected that then onto God, as if, you can't question God.
Well, you can't. Not that you shouldn't, which is what he's really talking about here, but you literally can't. Because there's no reason at all to think that God is real. It's like questioning Voldemort. He doesn't answer. Why? Because he doesn't exist. But the religious, they don't want you to question God, or rather, they don't want you to question the things that the clergy says about God, because, they're using empty claims about God to control you and make themselves more wealthy and more powerful. So don't ask questions, you pitiful serf. Just do what you're told.
But yet for my mum, I can remember sometimes in the car and we'd be driving, and like I was a teenager and I was kind of growing in my faith, but certainly had massive questions. And I remember at one point just being like, Mum, is the Bible really for real? Like, is it not just one massive story?
Well, that's a good question. One that more Christians ought to ask. But of course, they don't, because they've largely been indoctrinated and brainwashed that you simply can't ask those questions. And the reason you don't ask is because the clergy, the people that get looked up to by the religious masses, they have no good answers. The Bible is a weapon used to obtain and maintain control. If it wasn't for the Bible and their questionable oratory skills, churches wouldn't exist. Nobody would show up and throw money in the collection plate so that these people can run around and drive BMWs. These people would have to find something useful to do with their lives. And hey, we can't have that, can we?
And I just remember my mum's response being so neutralizing. She wasn't like, Johnny, would you come on? Like, how much have I taught you? How much have I showed you? I just loved her patience. I loved her kindness in that moment. She was willing to accept my doubt for what it was. And for the rest of the conversation, we just chatted about it. She just allowed me to be me.
She's also not trying to con you. She, like you, is a victim. You're both victims of religion. You've both allowed yourselves to be victimized by your own insecurities and emotional distress to the point that you were taken advantage of by an irrational system of belief that promises grand rewards but provides nothing demonstrable. All of your rewards come after you're dead, and conveniently beyond the ability for anyone to come back and tell the rest of them that it's all true. But the church, their rewards come now. They want your money. They want your adoration. They want your attention. And if they have to lie to you to get it, they will. They have no problem with that at all. How theists can't see this going on right under their noses, I will never understand.
And so I do have a strong faith today. I'm not ashamed of that.
You should be, because you had questions before, and those questions should have led you to seeking out factually correct and objectively demonstrable answers. It's how people leave the faith. It's how I left the faith. I had questions, Christianity provided no answers, religious leaders told me to stop asking uncomfortable questions, uncomfortable for them because it just made them look bad, and I said screw that and kept looking. And the answers that I found, the answers that were most defensible, those were not the answers that the religious wanted me to find. You should have done the same thing, Johnny. It's sad that you chose to remain deluded.
I certainly trust in a good God, but I have questions.
Then ask them. Go ahead. But don't be afraid to acknowledge the answers if they go outside of your blind religious faith. Care more about the truth than you do about your beliefs. Your beliefs can be wrong. Your faith can be misplaced. The truth is the truth, regardless of your emotional comfort. But I bet you won't do that because you've got a job with Andy's group, and that requires you to maintain your beliefs in order to keep getting paid. It's kind of insidious how all of this works.
And I think even if you're to look at the Gospels, right, and you're to look at some like the key figures, like let's take Peter for example, right, as if Peter is a classic example of someone who at times failed, and that was okay. Like say denying even knowing that he was friends with Jesus on the day that Jesus was crucified, and yet Jesus was kind to him.
Well, that's the story. And I'm not saying that you can't look at the story and learn something from it without acknowledging that any of it is true, because there is no evidence that any of it is. But Christians can't do that. They can't say, well, this is just a story. They can't look at Jesus as just a mythical figure. The second they do that, their entire religion falls apart. It's one of the reasons why the Bible is never to be questioned. It has to be seen as ultimately authoritative to the religious because that's all they've got. It's the best control device they have. This book must be absolutely true and it can never be questioned. The second you start looking at the core concepts and realizing that they're just not defensible, dude, you're on the 9:15 train out of Godville.
Or you think of Thomas, the disciple, after Jesus had been resurrected. Thomas's friends, they come up and they talk to him like, Jesus is risen again. And Thomas is like, I can't believe it. I won't believe it until I see him.
That's a literary device. If you watch TV or read books, you'll notice that it's being used constantly. It's been around for thousands of years. How can people not know this?
And so there's doubt there in Thomas. And when Jesus comes and meets with Thomas, he doesn't give out to him. And you'd expect him to. You'd be like, come on, Thomas. After all we've been through, would you not have believed your friends? But yet, Jesus reveals the wounds that's in his hands. He reveals the wound that's in his scar. And he's like, I'm allowing you to see this for yourself, to restore your faith. There's kindness there.
Yeah, it's the Dana Scully character who starts out a skeptic and eventually gets convinced that all the weird things that are going on in the background are real. It's the character that the audience is supposed to identify with that draws them into the conspiracy. This is nothing new.
There's kindness in the face of doubt. And so I would say that being a Christian, it's not easy. Although it is the best thing that I have, but I would say that I definitely am not going to be putting up my hand and saying that I have all the answers, because it's just not that simple.
You don't have any answers. No demonstrable answers anyhow. You have indoctrination and emotional comfort and an unhealthy dose of religious mind poison running through your veins. You've been taught from an early age that the Bible has the answers that you should look for and believe, just as Muslims are taught the same thing about the Quran, and Hindus the same thing about the Vedas. Here's all your answers. Don't go looking anywhere else. Don't go trying to verify anything this book has to say. If you do, you're sinning, and some magic sky daddy is going to get you. And, by the way, listen to the priesthood too. They're God's mouthpieces on earth. Just ask them. You need to do what they say, or, again, it's a sin, and God is going to squash you flat. Yet, the minute that you reject all of these emotionally derived ideas and start thinking for yourself, it's the second that you realize that the Bible doesn't have any actual answers and needs every bit as much scrutiny as everything else. That's when the mind poison starts getting driven from your brain. It's when you start seeing the world for what it is, not for what the purveyors of religion want you to think that it is. And they are ever so terrified of you taking the red pill. It means they're going to have to go get a real job. And they don't want to do that.
And I would also encourage anyone who's watching this video that regardless the question that you may have or the critique that you may have, just be completely 100% honest with God. He can take anything.
Even if God isn't real? Because you can't just assume things that don't have evidence to support them. You might as well be praying to Lassie. I mean, she saved Timmy when he fell down the well, didn't she? At least she was real. God, not so much. But that's something that the religious are terrified to let go of.
One of the mentors in my own life once told me that if you can't be your true self in front of God, then what's the point?
Yeah. Do you think the pedophile priests are their true selves in front of God? Or do you think these people know that there's nothing to worry about and they're just doing it for the power, influence, and money?
Like if God is the all-knowing, then he knows you for who you are. He knows your best parts, but he knows your worst parts, and he loves you still.
Well, if that's the case, why do you have to talk to God at all? Doesn't he already know everything you're going to say? Why bother? Go do something useful with your time. But of course, you notice that they're treating God like he's just another person. God has all the characteristics of people, with all the human foibles and weaknesses and behaviors that we have. Why? Because we just made him up.
Be real, be honest. He can take it. He's big enough. And that's what I would encourage people. Whatever it is, the question, the doubt, be honest, be real. And God is big enough to deal with it.
Yeah, God is big enough to deal with it. No, you're just talking to yourself. That's all you're doing. That's all any theist is doing, regardless of the imaginary friend they think that they're talking to. They're just having a conversation with their inner voice and thinking it's answering. Now, for some of them, that's insane. It truly is. For others, it's just self-delusion. But there's no evidence that any of this is actually going on. I keep getting into these long, rambling discussions with theists where they will insist that whatever they believe is true because it has to be, and anything that you believe has to be wrong because it disagrees with them, so of course it is. They entirely lack the capacity to examine their beliefs or any evidence that goes against their beliefs because them being right is a foregone conclusion, at least in their tiny little minds. You can't have a rational discussion with a person like that. It doesn't matter if it's some crazy guy on YouTube or Andy Bannister or William Lane Craig or whoever. These people are simply not open to their heartfelt beliefs possibly being wrong at all. Everyone disagrees, but they're evil sinners who are doing it all wrong. Anyone who comes to the same conclusion, well, yeah, they're doing it right, they're fine. This is just a complete waste of time. Luckily, the advanced planet is realizing just how dumb the entire religious game is, and they're leaving in droves. Pretty soon, these fanatics will be the only ones left. Sad, pathetic losers buried deep in their own delusions with no one to talk to but each other. I don't know about you, but I'm actually looking forward to that.
Bum